Hey, welcome. This is DJ Straight coming to you live tonight from Praise in the Closet. And as usual, it's been a beautiful day. This Tuesday on no, it's not Tuesday, it's Monday, February the 21st. How could I forget? Because that was a holiday, a President's Day. But listen, if you're on Facebook, go ahead and share. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe so you can see all of the great shows that we have coming up. And again, tonight, I am elated to have our guest because, as you know, we're celebrating Black History Month. And I wanted to get people that I knew or I heard of, and they have done great service in their local community, their county, their state, and the nation. And I didn't want to just go to a booklet and read and then I'd come and present something. So tonight I have somebody, and something seems to be in my throat. But anyway, listen, tonight I have a very special guest. Now I am going to read a little bit of his bio. And honestly, it's so many great accomplishments. I was tired just sitting down and reading it. Not that I had to do all the things that he did. So let me just say, I am happy and elated to introduce Dr. Robert Lee Howard Jr., all the way from Xenia, Ohio. And we're going to find out where Xenia, Ohio is. But listen, he has 4 degrees from 4 different colleges. He has a Bachelor of Science a Bachelor of Science in General Science from Morehouse. He has a Bachelor of Aerospace Engineer from Georgia Tech, a Master of Science in Industrial Engineering with a focus in human factors from North Carolina A&T State University. Then he has a PhD in aerospace engineering with a focus in spacecraft engineering from the University of Space Institute. If that's not enough, he has accomplishments and medals and awards for NASA, the NASA Exceptional Service Medal, NASA Equal Employment Opportunity Medal, the NASA Superior Accomplishment Award, numerous other NASA Group Awards, the Benjamin Banneker Legacy Award, the Network Journal's Under 40 Achievement Award. Then he's a member of the Lunar Architecture Team and the Mars Architecture Team, and is the Architecture and Human Factors Lead for the outfitting and habitability testing of the 20-foot vacuum chamber of the Exploration Atmosphere Study. Now, his current position is he's the lead for the habitability domain. He's the co-lead of the Center for Design and Space Architecture. He has served on design and test teams for several NASA space teams, the Orion Multi-Purpose Crew Vehicle, Orion Capsule Parachute Assembly Team, Altair Lunar Lander, Deep Space Habitat, and the Foundation Surface Habitat and Mars Transit Habitat. And if I didn't know my alphabets, I know them now because some of those words were hard to pronounce. But I am elated to bring on board today from Praise from the Closet with DJ Straight. Y'all see him in my little uniform with DJ Straight. And I am bringing him on, and his name is, guess where he works? He works at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I turned my light off so I could pretend like I'm in space, but then I really couldn't see that well. So, ladies and gentlemen and congregation and audience, welcome to WGMLB celebrating Black History Month, Dr. Robert Lee Howard Jr. Thank you, Dr. Howard, for coming on. I have to clap for you myself. Let me get some water because I'm out of breath already reading that. And that was just a 1-page bio.
Thank you, DJ Straight.
Very good. Thank you for joining us. So tell me something, first of all. Where is Xenia, Ohio?
So, what's funny is I don't exactly know. It's near Dayton. So I was born in Xenia, of course, and we moved when I was 2 years old. An F5 tornado came through and ripped up the town, destroyed half of it. And so my parents said it's time to leave. We moved from there to Florida. It was too hot. We moved from there to Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where I grew up.
That's where you grew up, in Greensboro. So Greensboro is quite a ways from Houston, Texas. So tell me, how did you get, let's talk about your childhood. What got you involved in space and wanting to do things in reference to space?
So, secret to the listeners, DJ Straight knows a bit about this because she's my cousin Lynn, so she saw me grow up.
Hey.
So, I love space ever since I was little. My mom told me that if Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or Sesame Street or Electric Company, or something, this is when I was 3, if something like that was on, if I was in the room and not doing anything, I might watch it, but I knew what time of day and what channel to turn Star Trek on. Oh. So I would just get my hands on anything space related that I could from 3 years old and up. We had a minor crisis when I was 5 because we had moved to North Carolina, and one of my favorite shows, Space 1999, I had learned about it when I was in Florida, but in North Carolina, it came on after my bedtime. So I couldn't miss Space 1999. My mom worked out an arrangement where I agreed to go to bed an hour early, and she would wake me up for Space 1999.
Really? That is very clever. Wow. Okay. So I was told that you like to collect paper towel holders, the last part of paper towel, the toilet paper holder. What did that have to do with space?
So when I was little and we would go up to DC and visit our cousins, I would ask them for paper towel rolls, for toilet paper rolls. They asked for cereal boxes too and egg cartons, but I would build spaceships out of them. They were things of my own. This is how I think people knew I was going to be an engineer before I knew what engineering was.
Okay.
I would come up with my own ideas for spaceships and I would build them out of whatever I could get my hands on, which was cardboard.
So when you built the spaceships, was it just something from your imagination, or you were trying to mimic what you had seen on TV?
A little of both. For the most part, I didn't have the right materials to make things that I'd seen on TV, so I just made what I could make with the shapes available.
Okay, so let me ask you this. When the other children, you do have siblings, correct?
I do. 2 older sisters and a younger brother.
Okay, so when the other children were outside playing, were you in the house playing with your space toys or a Martian suit?
I would play outside too. Never had a Martian suit. Yeah, no, I didn't have a Martian suit. I don't think I had any spacesuits. But I did draw I made a discovery when I was like 8, I guess. Mm-hmm. If you take a house key and scratch it against the wall, it'll leave a mark like a pencil, except it's permanent. And an 8-year-old boy should get in trouble for doing that. I didn't because of what I did. My mom discovered that in my closet, I had drawn a spacecraft control panel.
Really? Interesting. Now, when you drew that panel, did you exactly know what the pieces of the panel were, or you just drew the image?
Well, I had made it up. It was, I can't really remember it now, but I didn't have access to the information for it to be realistic, but I had display screens and buttons. So it was my own version of what should some sort of control interface on a spacecraft look like, at least from an 8-year-old's perspective.
Wow, that's great. So walk us up to you deciding to go to Morehouse. 1 second. Before going to Morehouse, were you involved in any activities in your elementary, junior high, high school regarding space?
Oh, not really. There weren't. I was involved in a lot of extracurricular clubs, but there weren't any that were space related. So I would go to the library whenever I could, and I would find the space section. It was before I even knew the Dewey Decimal System. I could just instinctively find any library space system. Wow. And so I would read anything I could learn about space, wherever I could get my hands on it.
That is great. Okay. So there's a lot to cover. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to go to space camp, but my parents couldn't afford it. My senior year in high school, I learned about an essay contest. They said, you're the director of NASA with limited funds. We choose a space station, a moon base, or a Mars mission, and why? And I figured since creativity was a criteria, I couldn't choose any of those and win. So I came up with my own idea that I called the Mobile Space Base. And it was a spacecraft that you could disassemble and reconfigure and reassemble. it could orbit like a space station, it could become an interplanetary spacecraft, and it could land and be a surface base. So I said do all three.
Okay, hold tight. Break that down for me in terms. You did tell me again what you said that you did since you couldn't fit the other criteria because that's brilliant.
So I didn't want to choose the three because a human space program needs to do all of them. So I said, if they're only giving me the money for one, let me come up with one that can do all three. So I designed a space station that can turn into a spaceship and travel to the moon and Mars, but could then land and turn into a base on either the moon or Mars.
Wow. So when you entered that contest, what did they say? Were they shocked?
I never heard from them, so I can only imagine, but I'm pretty sure they were shocked, and I'm pretty sure it was more than they wanted me to do, because the next year I applied again and won again, but the rule had changed. So I'd sent several pages of material and a bunch of pictures, and they said the second year they said response has to fit on a single sheet of paper. So I used an 8.5 by 14 sheet of paper and fit it in.
So you outsmarted them, huh? That is cool. So I saw that you had a Bachelor of Science in General Science from Morehouse College.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how you selected Morehouse.
So I didn't really. I always say I applied to 5 schools and went to the 6th one. I was set on going to the Air Force Academy, and my mom was trying to talk me out of it because, of course, our uncles were military, so they were gone all the time. And she kept trying to come up with ways to convince me. She couldn't come up with a way. I actually got accepted to the academy, and they'd sent my airplane ticket. But somehow or another, my father's roommate from college was at Morehouse, was one of the administrators at Morehouse. So that's how they knew about Morehouse. They sent them a package of all the things that I'd done. And I got a call from Morehouse saying, will you fill out an application so you can take this scholarship? They had just gotten a NASA scholarship that included internships at NASA centers.
Wow.
And that blew away the Air Force Academy. So I said, sure, I'll go to Morehouse.
Okay, so let me take you forward here. So in front of hindsight, are you glad that you went to Morehouse versus going to the Air Force Academy?
I am. Now I would have enjoyed the academy, but it was the best route to NASA that I knew of. And if that program if the NASA scholarship hadn't been created, it probably still would have been the better approach. But with that NASA scholarship, that was better than what the Air Force would have offered.
Okay, so when you went to Morehouse College, was that your first time away from home?
Well, I've come up to DC to visit all the time, but in terms of leaving family, that was the first time I'd left for a long period of time. I'd done summer programs in high school where I was away for 5 or 6 weeks, and I'd done space camp in Alabama, which is 10 days. But that was the first time being away for months at a time.
So how was that adjustment? And then when did you actually start taking courses to lead you to the path for your Bachelor of General Science?
It wasn't a bad adjustment for me. One, I was so busy, there wasn't much time to do anything but do the schoolwork. They started the first summer, and it was kind of interesting the way it turned out because my family saw Morehouse before I did. So I remember I mentioned I got a second trip to space camp. That was right before Morehouse had a summer science program for incoming students.
Mm-hmm.
I was signed up for that, but it was right after space camp. So I literally flew from Greensboro to Alabama for space camp, and then flew from Alabama to Atlanta to go to Morehouse. So they'd seen the campus before, and like most HBCUs, it was in the hood. And it was so in the hood that you could almost mark the day on the calendar by hearing police sirens.
Wow, incredible.
So
Go ahead.
When they picked me up from the airport, my brother said, Mom's not going to let you stay here, because she, of course, kept us sheltered. So the hood wasn't something we saw much of.
Correct.
But she did let me stay. And it was fun. It was scary at times because it was in the hood. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, students did get shot during the year. But wow. I wasn't in the middle of any dangerous situations personally.
So let me ask you for a second, go back. What
Mhm.
was space camp like when you went to space camp? What was that like?
Space camp was awesome. So it's kind of like an emulation of astronaut training. You get a huge dose of exposure to the science and engineering behind spaceflight. They have guest speakers. One of the guys who helped invent the lunar rover was there and spoke to us. There are simulators that are essentially, you could call them pretend spacecraft, but they're connected, so the switches actually work and they're plugged into a simulation computer. So when
Hmm.
you're doing things, if the vehicle reacts, and you do a simulated mission, there were several practice missions that led up to a 24-hour mission, and I got to be the shuttle commander and space station commander during my 24-hour mission. Basically, you fly a sim where you're launching to the space station and then you transfer over and become part of the station crew.
So was it fascinating to be around other young people that had that same energy and passion as you had?
Yeah, that was fun. That's something that growing up I didn't get to experience. I was the only space kid, basically.
So are did you able to keep relationships with those children? Do you have kept in contact with any of them?
Only a couple of them. One of them's actually at NASA now. I haven't come across her in a while, but I think early when we first started our careers, we hung out a good bit.
That's great. Okay. So let's go back to Morehouse and getting
Mhm.
to Morehouse. When did you actually start taking courses that would lead you onto the path of where you are now?
So it started that freshman summer. They started us off with courses. It was a way to sort of ease into the college environment. I think we only had 3 classes that summer, but those were part of our curriculum, and it continued into the fall. I actually started out as a computer science major because that I knew computers. I didn't know science or engineering, so it was something comfortable. But after a couple internships, I talked to some of the astronauts, and they suggested being an engineer. So I switched to Morehouse's dual degree engineering program. It's a joint program that they have with Georgia Tech and several other engineering schools. You complete a degree at Morehouse and then transfer over to the engineering school, in my case, Georgia Tech. And your credits transfer, but you have to complete the engineering courses as well. When I made that switch, it was the beginning of my junior year. So I chose general science because I'd already completed most of the courses for general science.
So when you transferred over to Georgia Tech, there was more exposure for you in your particular field, and then you were able to do more physically and learn more as well, and that you meet more people that were interested in the program that you were doing.
I did meet more people who were interested in NASA. Now, it wasn't necessarily people who were in the same NASA scholarship program because those people already knew.
Okay.
But there were more people who had interest in space or in aeronautics or anything in the aerospace type field.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask this question. Were you the only African American in that program, or were there a few others?
So the depends on the program. Space Camp, I was the only African American there. The NASA scholarship, it was specifically through Morehouse. There were 3 programs: one at Morehouse, one at Spelman, and one at Florida A&M. So
Okay.
those were all minority outreach programs. So everyone in those programs was Black. But and this is a criticism that I have of the program. NASA didn't tell the universities how to pick the students. So the universities viewed it as free scholarship money. Of course, all of those schools needed any scholarship money they could get their hands on. They picked people on the basis of their grades, not on the basis of their interests. So even though everyone in the program was Black, I was the only person in the Morehouse program who actually wanted to work for NASA.
So was that almost like a drawback mentally for you?
No, I think it did us a disservice as a people in terms of getting more Blacks into the space program because no one was telling Morehouse that they needed to pick students who want to work for NASA. They just picked students who had good grades and needed money. So for most of the students, it was just a free way to get through Morehouse, knowing that they had no intention of going to NASA. And I can't blame them,
Yes.
but I think it could have been organized better. But it didn't distract me at all because I was passionate about space, so it didn't matter if anyone else was.
Absolutely. And see, I like the fact that you stuck to what it is you wanted to do. You didn't allow the circumstances or the environment to shadow, take away your concentration. And then also you were just determined. And before you get off, I want you to talk about that determination against all odds, because that's not a wide field. And so, okay, Georgia Tech. Now then you have a Master of Science in Industrial Engineer. And for the people that are listening, this is DJ Straight talking to the Honorable Dr. Robert L. Howard Jr. He now works at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And we are absolutely just taking a journey back to build up to where he is now, because that is what he's talking about is such a great accomplishment. And now we're going to ask him about, you have a Master of Science in Industrial Engineer with a focus in human factors from North Carolina A&T University. Talk about that if you can.
Okay, so obviously A&T was my second HBCU. I grew up at A&T, so it was nice to come home. When we were deciding where I was going to go, it was kind of the question of who was going to give what kind of money. And my parents pointed out that I could go to another school and have scholarship money to pay for it, but no way to get around because I didn't have a car back then. Or I could go to A&T, and since I was living at home, I could use the fellowship money I was getting to pay for a car. So it really wasn't no difference. I love going to A&T. I kind of tease people because I say A&T was my second favorite HBCU. Nothing beats Morehouse, but it was an amazing school. So I'm going to offend my Spelman sisters and say, if you're a female, A&T is your best choice.
Go ahead and talk about A&T, because I do know some seniors. I believe they're graduating next year, and they have mentioned A&T.
Okay.
You probably know them, so you can talk about that, because that's probably been, that school has been in your family for a while. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. A&T is a family tradition. My parents taught there from when we were little. I remember being in the hall, seeing the gigantic college students pass by and thinking, wow, they're so big. And we would often have to stay up there when they were in their office hours. So we would play in the empty classrooms or in my father's office. But it was, to me, it's what made college a normal thing, just because I was so connected with it.
You had great.
A&T also has a strong support system. I think this is true for most of your HBCUs. It was true for Morehouse too. Their perspective is they value you as a student, and they're going to equip you to succeed. They're not there to see you fail. They're there to see you pass. You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to know the material, but they're your ally, not your enemy.
That's wow. That's great. I think I know a couple of your cousins who went to A&T, but I don't know if they had that same perspective.
I think you might know a few.
I know a few of them. So check this out. Okay, good. So now you've done Morehouse, you've done Georgia Tech, you're at North Carolina A&T, and then you leave again and you go to the University of Tennessee with a doctorate in aerospace engineering. And I was reading that your doctoral dissertation was formation of a cis-lunar human transportation architecture through the use of analytic, heuristic, and parametric algorithms. And there we go again with the whole alphabet. In Sesame Street, it was Alpha Projected, but not compare them or something like that for that album. So tell us what that means in layman's terms. Why did you pick that? And then tell us about your experience at University of Tennessee.
So my professors made me pick that name. I had a much simpler name at first, and I think it didn't sound academic enough for them. What it basically means is I wanted to design a spaceship to go to the moon. At the time, we just had the space station and the space shuttle, but the moon's always been an interest for me. So I wanted to see, given NASA's limitations in terms of money, what would be a way to use existing technology and go to the moon in as simple a fashion as possible. So that whole title just meant that I was using a combination of math formulas, combination of it's called expert systems, but it's basically rule-based logic. So if this, then that. And I mentioned the math, but there are two types of math. There's math where it's a extrapolation, say trying to think of a simple way to say this.
Yes, help me.
So parametrics are when you represent something complicated with a simple equation. So let's say, for instance, the food you're buying. Let's say you weigh the food that you buy each week, and you keep a chart of how much your food weighs. You could write an equation based on that to say how much food you're going to buy as a function of what time of year. That would be a parametric.
Okay.
Whereas analytic is when you have an exact math equation. That's kind of like the Pythagorean theorem, where you've got length and width, length and height, and you calculate the hypotenuse of a triangle.
I'm gonna shake my head. But this is very helpful, because honestly, even though I know you, this is helping me to understand, and I'm sure the audience is having a greater understanding. And I definitely appreciate you coming in, breaking all this down to me, because we have not even gotten to NASA yet, what you do now, and that's where we're going. So yes, I'm like, whoo, yeah, whoo, go ahead for it, keep going.
So basically, it was trying to see how big is it, how much fuel do you need to get it to the moon, how do you land on the moon, how do you get back to Earth afterwards. I actually had an interesting story here. I don't know, I didn't get to do all the behind the scenes, but for the coming back to Earth,
Mm-hmm.
Earth, well, of course, Earth has an atmosphere. When things hit the atmosphere fast, that kinetic energy, well, the speed gets turned into heat. And that's why spaceships have heat shields.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out what kind of heat shield that my spacecraft needed. I didn't know how to figure that out. I tried to email some people at NASA and didn't get an answer.
They didn't know.
Well, I think they knew. They didn't answer.
Okay.
And so I figured out a way to just kind of kludge it. I found a heat shield that was for another system, another project someone else had done that was big enough, and I used it. The next year when I got to NASA, there was they do these annual security briefings, and they used as a case study that a university student contacted NASA wanting to know about aerothermal calculations, which is what I was asking for. And the bottom line was, don't give that information out. I don't know, but I wonder if I was the student they were referencing.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't know the details, but I can imagine why they wouldn't want to give that out, because that's the same information that technology is something that's called dual use. That means it's something you need for space travel, but it's also something the military could use.
Okay.
If someone knew how to do those calculations, they would also know how to make a ballistic missile survive re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. So a threat country that wanted to learn how to bomb America would need that information.
Okay. That's great. Okay. Now you've gotten your 4 degrees from 4 different colleges, universities, HBCUs. When you graduated, where was your first job?
Oh, there was no question or choice. I was already, before I even started my doctorate, I already had my job lined up at NASA.
Okay, very good. And the reason that I asked that question, if I can interject for a moment, I worked as an office manager at USDA, the Agricultural Research Service Center, and I had a supervisor there, and I asked him, here's a I'm pretty sure you were the student in question. Oh, that was a comment. And I asked him, I said, Dr. Dietrich, because all he loved was watershed. He was from Red Cloud, Nebraska. And then he moved to Arizona and he came to Maryland. I said, Dr. Dietrich, are you doing what you want to do? He says, yes. Now, when I worked for him, he already had 46 years in the government. This was back in 2001. And he said, yes, I started out doing what I wanted to do because I, as his office manager, worked very closely with him. And people would literally fly in from across the country in USDA just to talk to him for 10 to 15 minutes. That's how great he was. And he did that. And when I think of Dr. Dietrich, I think about you, because from 3 years old, you knew what you wanted to do and you worked towards that goal. Now, many people may go to school and get a degree and they may not work where they want to work in that field right away. or they never, because I know some people say, I just needed a piece of paper so my mother could get out my head. I can go find a job. So I commend you on staying focused and doing what it is that you wanted to do. So there was never an in between. You already had the job at NASA. So talk about the journey that led you now, because you're the lead for the habitability domain, and then you're the co-lead of the Center for Design and Space Architecture. Talk about those and what those mean.
Okay. So it's a couple things. The habitability domain lead is sort of an expertise position. That one's not leading a group of people, it's more leading a technology or area of knowledge. They call people who do that subject matter experts. So for things that relate to humans living and working in space, I'm kind of one of the main go-to people. So when there are different projects going on, like I'm supporting the unpressurized lunar rover, the pressurized lunar rover, the lunar surface habitat, the Mars transit habitat. I'm occasionally consulted for the lunar lander and the Gateway space station. And we're doing 2 tests now, one in a vacuum chamber that we're outfitting as a habitat to simulate low atmospheric pressure, and a simulated Mars base that's going to do a food study to simulate how would crews live or work for a year in isolation. So for all of those, I'm kind of the person that they'll look to see how do we need the area configured for the crew to live in. The Center for Design and Space Architecture is a team of NASA engineers as well as contractors. A lot of those are industrial designers or architects. And in that area, we'll do concept development for vehicles. There's often what's called the NASA reference configuration. What that means is before NASA issues a contract to companies to build something, we do an internal design so we can understand what it needs to be and make sure that the requirements in the contract are the right requirements to get the job done. My team does the internal architecture for a lot of those reference concepts.
That is very, very good, because all those things are necessary. So you really are an essential employee. So when Houston has 2 inches of snow, you probably have to go in, because that's
I don't think I remember Houston ever having 2 inches of snow, but
okay. When it's bad weather, it's like us up here, we say, okay, oh yeah, great. But you have to go in. Is that true, because of what you're
so
doing?
it depends. In this COVID world, we're almost all virtual. There are
Okay.
only a couple of things where I have to go in. It's like for like those 2 tests, the exploration atmosphere test, the vacuum chamber, and the Mars habitat. Those are both physical things that we're building at NASA. So I do have to go in from time to time for those. And
Okay.
occasionally for the rovers, there are things where I have to go in.
Okay, so let me ask you this: the Orion capsule parachute assembly team. Give me a brief synopsis on what you did for that.
Okay, so that's Orion. Orion is the new capsule. It's kind of like the Apollo capsule during the moon race, but it's a little bit bigger and it's a lot more capable. I did a 6-month rotation with the capsule parachute assembly team. That was just to get some experience in another area. What we were doing at that point in the parachute development, and the parachute is the way for capsules. If you've watched I Dream of Jeannie, they show a little
Yes,
spaceship.
yes, yes.
They show the spaceship coming in and it's floating down on some parachutes.
Okay,
So we needed bigger parachutes for Orion than we had used for any of the past vehicles.
okay,
What we were doing at that point was testing scale parachutes. So we were developing parachutes of increasing size, and we were testing them to learn how to open them properly, because if it doesn't open correctly, then there's no recovery. The crew's going to be lost. So during the time I was doing my rotation there, we were doing field testing at Yuma Proving Ground. That's an Army base. I want to say it was Arizona, I forget.
yes, humor.
Mm-hmm. So I was on the team that was going out there to support the test. So it was basically observing and helping to collect the track where it was landing.
Okay, so this has been great. Now, I read on your one pager that you actually have spare time. Actually have spare time, and that you wrote 2, I want to say novels, 2 books.
Mm-hmm.
And I just happened to go on Amazon, And I saw those books. The first one is Nubian Star Nation Book 1. That had, I believe that one had 4 stars or 3.5 stars. And then the second book was Nubian Star Nation Book 2, and that one had 5 stars. Ladies and gentlemen, you can go on Amazon and order his book. And maybe one day when you see him, he'll autograph that. Tell us about those books, and if you just touch on them, because we really want people to support your books.
So they're my contribution to Black history. I got motivated because I felt like people were forgetting our history, or wasn't being taught, or there wasn't an appreciation. And I started to ask, what could I do? I felt like if I wrote an essay about Black history, people would say it's history, it's boring, and they wouldn't read it. So I said, what if I take the essence of our history and turn it into a science fiction adventure? And not only that, but people don't appreciate things until they're lost. So let me take some things from our history and remove them from our history and let the characters experience what that means. So what I did is I combined several different genres. Obviously it's science fiction, but the specific types, there's Afrocentrism, there is space opera, that's like Star Wars, Star Trek, lots of big ships. Okay. There is futurism, so looking at what happens in the future, and there's alternate history, looking at what happens if our history was different. So I took something controversial. I said, what if the Civil War didn't end the way it ended? What if the North lost? So the South wins the Civil War back in the 1800s. The Confederate States of America ends up taking over the North. They end up taking over the entire planet. And so that means the Underground Railroad's undone. The Confederate States takes all the slaves back from Canada. After World War II, they end up conquering Africa. They end up taking over the whole world. So there's nowhere for slaves to escape to. But then as space travel develops and the Confederacy starts colonizing outer space, there are a group of slaves who realize there's now a place to escape. And they plan a great slave revolt. In the year 2165, there's a global rebellion. They use that as a distraction. 1.5 million slaves steal colony ships and they escape Earth. They travel in space for 40 years. They end up settling. They discover a place where there are 7 planets that are habitable, and they found what's called the Nubian Star Nation. My novel picks up 400 years after that, where they've grown. There are 23 billion of them. They're a society of 40 different planets. I follow 2 people who are growing up, Roscoe Brown and Willa Chapel. Those who are history buffs know those names. So every name in the Nubian Star Nation series is a name from history. They're not necessarily the characters from the history, but it's a trigger. So it's for you to say, who was Willa Chapel? Who was Roscoe Brown? And go research those people and see who they were. So book 1 follows Roscoe and Willa as they grow up into adulthood. Roscoe makes a big discovery, and that discovery is going to change everything about the Nubian Star Nation.
I'm going to be honest with you. When I saw the title of those books, I didn't have a clue of what they were.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But since you explained those books to me, I am really interested, and I'm going to get those books. Now, I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to read them both, but you tweaked my interest because, as you said, you took a subject. We get 28 days, but yet it's 365 days and all these years. And you took that subject and you were very creative in the way that you presented those books. Let me add them to the stream one more time for those. If you go on Amazon, that's book 2, Nubian Star Nation, Dr. Robert L. Howard Jr. And then book 1 is Nubian Star Nation, book 1. And I encourage you all to go on Amazon and order these books, even though they probably overprice everything. And I'm just saying that from a personal perspective, but I am really interested in what you just stated. I have enjoyed this interview. So let me say this. We know that we have people watching, and this is going to be a first. I was trying to get my phone lines hooked up so you could call in. But if you have comments for Dr. Robert L. Howard Jr., and I've been posting them or if you have questions, I want you to go ahead and type those. If you're listening on YouTube, if you do them on Facebook, I will be able to read them. But while they're doing that, I would like for you to do two things. I want you to talk up to encourage somebody who, even if they're a youth or maybe they're an adult and they're in a different job, to how you did that stick to itness. And then your family sounds interesting. So I want you to tell me about your parents, what they did or do as a career. And then you said you had siblings. You don't have to mention names, but tell us what you did, because this was fascinating to me. And pushing buttons, that's great. Go for it.
So the stick-to-itness is important. Just not giving up, having determination. They drilled that into us at Morehouse. The freshman summer science, they intentionally made it difficult because they wanted us to learn to not give up. And they gave assignments that you couldn't just do in 5 minutes and be done. I remember freshman semester, I had a 40-page history paper I had to do. And I think those were critical in preparing me for pursuing my doctorate. As long as you're alive, there's still an opportunity. So whether it's a job you don't like or some other situation you're facing, if you're still breathing, you have an opportunity to keep struggling. Now, preparation matters. So understanding whatever your area is, whatever it is, you need to learn what you need to do, because if you're trying to change jobs, they don't just fall off trees. You have to have the preparation as well as have the opportunity. And as you're struggling towards that, you have to make sure that you keep a good relationship at your current job, because that's whatever your track record is, it's going to follow you into the next thing you do.
Correct.
So excellence is important no matter where you are, whether it's where you want to be or if you're somewhere along the way. In terms of my family, they also are the reason for that too, because they help push us as well. My parents, they're retired now, but they were both professors. My father was in the business area. He taught real estate, he taught finance. My mom was in different versions of English. When we first came to North Carolina, she was teaching English in the Learning Assistant Center. And when she retired, she was teaching business communication in the business department. So different forms. And she also taught at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels at different points throughout her career. Because they were both educators, they made sure that we were all educated.
Yes.
They would check our homework every night, at least through middle school. I think that was when it sort of tapered off. My father would check anything math related, and my mom would check anything English related. But doing that, checking our homework every night, I think that was really important because it verified that what we were turning in was good. And understanding the homework meant we could understand the tests. So that's something I would encourage every parent to do. So all of my family was successful. My oldest sister is working at A&T now. She's working in their web system. She was a computer science major. My other sister is an emergency physician in New York. And of course, you remember medicine was always her thing. And my brother is a computer scientist at IBM.
Wow, that is great. And I understand I've had the opportunity to speak with one of your nephews, and I know that he is a subway. Let me see how I can make this term a title up for him. A subway engineer, architecture, structure design operator, because I've seen some of his work at such a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And that is great because you all had a great support system, and I know that you were also you had a great strong Christian upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
and that also helped, especially with some of those tests. I'm pretty sure you said some prayers before some of those tests. But
Absolutely.
I wanted to read one of the comments off of Facebook. This is from someone named Jenny Booker. It says, "Hi, Dr. Robert Howard Jr., my first cousin. Man, I'm proud of you. You knew at the age of 3 that you would be an astronaut." That's great. And then I've been putting, you even had a couple of comments from Japan. You also had some comments. Here's one from Japan. And here's somebody saying, "Hey, I have my copies." And then we have, you spoke of Yuma. Here's someone in Phoenix.
Hey, cousins. I love it.
Great job, Dr. Howard. I also 5 books to the first 5 that made contact today. So
That's
listen,
awesome.
listen. This is where you're going to contact. You're going to contact me, DJ Straight. You're going to go to either Gospel Music Lovers Buffet at gmail.com, or you may text me or call on this phone here, my studio phone. Okay. And then also, you can go to the website, WGMLB, Wonderful Gospel Music Lovers Buffet. We play all kind. I'm doing a spot. We play all kind of inspirational music. It is rap, classic gospel. We play Southern, bluegrass, bounce, anything that's positive. I even put Michael Jackson's song Music and Me on because I thought that was inspirational. But Dr. Robert L. Howard, I have certainly enjoyed interviewing with you today. And here's another comment. Here's a question from Japan.
So I have a couple of goals. Without going into too much detail, there's a spacecraft that I'm designing now that I'm doing in my spare time. I think it represents something that could be not NASA's next step, but the step after NASA's next step. So I'm trying to see if it's feasible. So that my goal now is to complete a feasibility study on it. And if it turns out to be feasible, I don't know that it will be, then my goal will be to convince executives at NASA headquarters that it's something we should pursue. And my other goal, Jenny calls me an astronaut. I'm not actually an astronaut. Astronauts are an official selected position at NASA that I would love to be, but I'm not. But I do have a goal that I want to go to space, whether it's through NASA as an astronaut one day, or whether it's through one of these commercial operators. We're starting to now, one of NASA's mission is to bring space to US industry. So we want industry to be able to go into space on their own. And we're at the point where they're starting to do that. Some of those companies have done a couple of lotteries. It's really the very beginning, but eventually spaceflight will be something that where anybody can buy a ticket, just like you buy a ticket to get on a plane. I hope that happens in my lifetime to where I can be one of the people who either buy a ticket or win a ticket and get to go into space.
Is that going to be that ticket?
They've raised the price. It's like $450,000 now.
Okay, I changed the postcard once you get there. I'm getting YouTube posts that people are going and buying those books.
Oh,
and
awesome.
What? I'm your manager. So we're going to talk about a cut later. We don't have to do it now. But you can answer this question, yes or no. Now, I had the privilege of hearing you do a rap. Is that rap copywritten?
Not yet.
Okay, well, then I don't want you to do it. When it gets copywritten, you will come back on here, and I want you to do that. Here's another question.
Would I be ready to go into space now? Absolutely.
Okay. What would you take?
Well, it depends. So some of the spaceships, you can't take anything with you, so there's no allocation. Others, there's room for some personal things, but I don't really have anything that I would take with me.
And what would your desire be with the length to stay there?
I would, again, it depends on what ride I get or how I get to go. My ideal would be to go to the moon, and I'd like to be on the moon for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
There are shorter versions, like that $425,000 flight, or $450, I forget how much it is. That one's really short. That's only like 6 minutes in space.
Okay, but they do take you all the way up for that price.
You're up into space.
Okay. I just want to know. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. When you go there and you write that postcard, I am going to take that postcard and blow it up and put it on my station for you. I will put it on my website.
Okay.
So if you could talk to your younger self, I'd say you knew what you wanted to do at 3. If you could talk to your younger self at 12, what would you tell your younger self then about now? I can't believe I stumped you. You don't have an answer? Go ahead.
Well, I wouldn't want to do anything that would disrupt me because I didn't exactly plan all the details of my path. And if I change something, would I miss the NASA scholarship? Would I miss working at NASA somehow? So there are some things I could have done differently that might have made me better prepared in some areas, but I also might have missed an opportunity. It's kind of like in science fiction, they have these time travel theories, and one of the tropes that they use is the more you try to change the more you try to change your past, the worse you make your future.
That, text me that because I have a show coming up. I'm going to use that phrase. So text or email me that. Now, I have a comment from a Wendy Salters. First, someone said, you look like your Uncle David. I guess you have an uncle named David, okay, whoever that is. And then also, have you purchased a piece of the moon? Is that even possible?
So yes, I own 2 plots on the moon and 1 on Mars.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Very good. Well, Dr. Robert Lee Howard Jr., this has been an excellent interview, and I really thank you for taking the time to come on and speak with DJ Straight, Praise from the Closet, WGMLB. No, but really, this has been, I knew you, but I have learned so much more about you. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us, the audience?
Well, minor note, the plots of land, it's sort of a joke, but there's a guy who made it a business venture. To me, it's the lesson that there are no excuses. You can find a way to make anything successful. So they're not going to hold up in court. It's like a novelty item, but for like $20, you can buy a plot of land. And I like to joke that my original one is more valuable because it was a larger plot, and now he sells smaller plots.
Okay. Well, we have a question. Look at the screen.
Should you be buying into the moon and Mars? So you can't buy directly into the moon and Mars. Those plots, they're fun for a novelty, but for something where you're actually serious, there are space companies you should look at for potential stock purchases. And you have to research to see which ones you're comfortable with. There are the big ones that have been around for a while. Those are fairly stable, but it's always a question of, are these young startup companies going to take their business away from them? And there's a lot of possibility there. But the young startups may also fail. So it's a business risk which ones you invest in, but I think space is going to be around for a while. And some of these space companies are going to see huge growth. So I'd say pay attention to space stocks.
Okay. And I can do that for free.
Yeah.
Great. All right, cool. Well, this has been very good. And honest to goodness, I could probably stay on another 15 or 20 minutes, but I'm mindful that we are in different time zones and we have quite a bit of people watching, and we still have comments coming in. But let me say that this won't be your last time on. This is the segment called Open Mic, but we also have other segments. We have My Siblings and Me, which we had a broadcast yesterday, and I had the opportunity to text your older sister yesterday, and she said she was going to try to get her siblings. So maybe that would work. And then also for the people that are listening, tomorrow is Tuesday, and we have nutrition nuggets. That's why you hit subscribe on this channel, and then you won't miss what's coming on. Tomorrow at 6:45, we have nutrition nuggets. On Wednesday, we have at 6 o'clock Tripping with the Birds. On Thursday at 5, and still continuing with Black History Month, we have Brandon McGee. He's a community activist, and then also he's a former Connecticut state representative. And then on Friday, which is on our regular show, What's Your Passion, we have author Princess Diana. So listen, we are on the move at WGMLB, and we have room for all. Dr. Howard, I have certainly learned about you, and I cannot leave this broadcast without saying thank you, Bob Jr.
You're very welcome, Lynn, and thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm DJ Straight because I'm in the closet, man. You know. You're welcome. This has been great. Stay on for a second. We're going to go out, but thank you all. Go on and hit subscribe to our channel if you have ideas for the shows, and I will be more than happy to take the ideas for your shows or at least hear them. I may not be able to use them all, but this is a station for everybody. Again, go on wgmlb.com and listen live, because we just had a song on Hillsong from the Inside Out, and then we switched to Milton Bingham, that a cappella song, The Lord is Blessing Me. So signing off until tomorrow with Nutrition Nuggets at 6:45. Very good information. If you go on our DJ Straight YouTube, last week she talked about takeout food, a week before last. But anyway, it was good. All right, cool. I will see you all. Don't go off yet. You gotta see my what is this show called? Open mic. All right.